Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. We have a bunch of different topics that we may discuss today, and I'm going to start with one that was originally phrased as what do we think, or how something about a publisher pulling a book that isn't AI. And I'm assuming that the unspoken part of that is that the publisher thinks that it's AI, but pulls it even though it's not AI. And there was a book that was published. Actually, I don't think it ever got published. It didn't never hit its publishing date, but someone I follow on Twitter was really onto this a couple of months ago, and a woman had published a book, or it's scheduled to be published probably right around now. And someone got an advanced copy of it and did a YouTube video that went on for like 45 minutes about how the book was AI. It was written by AI. And this became viral all over the place, at least where I am on the internet. And the author insisted that it wasn't AI, that what happened was she gave it to a friend to read and edit, and the friend used AI to rewrite it. And she didn't know until after everything. Yeah, exactly, exactly, Audrey. The always convenient friend. So my question is, how do people figure out whether or not something is AI? If the authors or the people behind it aren't willing to admit it. And I know that there are now apps that will try to detect if something is written by AI.
I
And
think they use AI.
They use
well,
AI.
right,
Use AI to
probably.
detect AI.
I,
Yeah,
my
but I'm mystified by the idea that someone could read a short story or a book and identify whether it's written by AI.
well, okay, I don't know how for sure, but remember I had those th three really crappy books that were written by AI, and it
Yeah,
was obvious
yeah,
because
yeah.
yeah. But I bought another one in that batch, and I finished reading it. And even though this story made sense, it had a plot, it kind of had a beginning and an end. It didn't repeat scenes endlessly, but there was just something about it that somehow the tone of it was sort of clinical. It was sort of an alternate history kind of set in a place like Earth, but not really. And I wrote a review of it on Goodreads,
Yeah.
and it just felt off. And yet the grammar was perfect, the spelling was perfect, but there was just something about it. It was like it was written sort of with tongs or something, and it just felt impersonal. And I'm pretty sure it used AI quite a bit, but it wasn't a total sort of obvious thing like those other ones. So I don't know, it's just a feeling, but really, do you really unpublish something because of a feeling? It's hard to say. That book,
I
by the way, has disappeared from where I bought it, which suggests something.
Yeah, I think the book that I mentioned has officially disappeared from the published world as well.
I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say quickly about apps that detect AI are, by everything I hear, worthless. As you said, Audrey, they use AI and they get false positives all the time, so they're not really reliable. So I would say that would definitely be a problem if, say, a major publisher started using one of those apps and it was declaring everything was written by AI. So that is definitely a concern.
Hmm.
Go ahead, Richard.
I was saying, I know all about the story, and I do know of the 45-minute YouTube video, and I kept saying to myself, I got to watch that, I got to watch that, because I'm assuming the steps they go through to indicate are things you can learn and look for in AI. But having said that, since AI keeps improving, whatever, it's almost like images. Once upon a time, it was very easy. It's counting them with fingers. Look at how many arms in the group picture and count them up. There's an extra arm. Things like that were obvious, but they've gotten better and better. So, I mean, it's an issue because if I'm a purchaser and I'm spending X amount of dollars for something, just like with anything else, if I buy furniture that's handcrafted versus, mass produced anything, I want, I'm taking a very different view. I'm taking a consumer view. I want to know that I'm spending my money on something worthwhile. And if somebody, all they had to do is push a few buttons, put in a few prompts, and they get an entire, I don't want to spend top dollar for that book. That book
Right.
is worth maybe 10 cents,
Besides, you
it
could
may
have
be good. It may be
generated
what
it
I want to
yourself.
read. Right. It may be what I want to read, but it should be, fast food versus haute cuisine.
Mhm.
There's a difference. Okay. And consumers should get what they're paying for. So I think the only way to protect consumers is, and this won't happen, but much like some images and stuff, they need to be watermarked. Now, you might say, yeah, but people can get around watermarks, et cetera. And that is probably true. But the kinds of people who are using prompts to create books aren't the ones that are going to figure that out. All right. There will be people who do figure out ways around it, but it's not going to be the people who are taking the easy way out to generate a book for sale. So with watermarks, if the vast majority of people can't get around it, that might at least be something. So whether something was written by AI, it gets watermarked by the application. So at least as a consumer, you have a choice. I mean, as you know from past, I am completely against all AI written material for books, et cetera, for anything creative. But if we're going to have it, then the people who are spending their hard-earned money need to know what they're buying. So,
Yeah,
I think
well, that's why I've decided I'm never going to use it for writing. That's just it. Not going to use it ever.
right.
So that way, at least I know where I'm at. I mean, if I kind of took a little, oh, I'll use it as a tool for editing or idea generating, I think I've crossed the line. And I'm not going to cross that line. And anyway, nobody cares because I'm such a small potato in the writing world that that's just the way I'm going to do
Right.
things. So there's that.
We are becoming artisans.
Yes, yes,
I,
exactly.
I keep seeing ads for it's primarily one company. There might be another one that promise to use AI to sell your book. And, the ads, writers claiming that they put their book out, couldn't get any sales. They paid this company some amount and they're selling thousands of books a month now. So, but
Well,
I haven't done that. I feel like that's a little bit different than using AI to write
right.
your book or do your cover or whatever. But I want to start from the proposition of no AI at all
Yeah,
in any
I
part
think
of it.
that's the best,
Yeah,
especially for us indies who aren't totally dependent. We can afford to be pure.
yeah. But the other thing, the talk about a watermark for things that are AI. Here's the problem: the people who are using AI to do this stuff are not going to do that.
No, no, the
You know?
applications are required to do that.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
what it has to be built into the application that there is watermark meaning just somewhere in the
So
output,
it's
hidden
identified.
from
Yeah.
users, right, is a
Yeah.
mark that says this was produced by and whatever app it is. I think that's at least a step. And
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
and then you don't need AI to determine if it was or not. It's actually just built into, just like
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
images have it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious. I'm willing to bet that you guys have these scenarios. You write, you talk to people that about your writing. They ask you about it and oh yeah, I want to write a book. I just don't know where to start. So you have someone in front of you who wants to become a writer. They haven't done it before. What's your advice to them?
Well, my advice would be is just to write something. I mean, I don't think you can just right away write a book. I think you just have to practice writing, and probably journaling would be the best thing, or just random thoughts, or like, isn't there something called free writing where you just sit down and dump it out onto the screen or the page or just whatever's in your head? just to get used to the idea of producing, sentences and paragraphs and building up. And then beyond that, though, unless a person has something they really want, like a story they've got in their mind, or some kind of memoir or something, if they don't have anything that needs to be turned into a book, then maybe they shouldn't bother.
Having written a novel in my first effort to write fiction, I'm the exception to that proves your rule, Audrey.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it works, but
Yeah,
usually you have something niggling away at you.
yeah,
There's some kind of story that keeps popping up in idle moments, and that's the thing that you're going to write. And maybe everyone's got that, and maybe a few people don't. So, but you have to test it. You just have to write
yeah,
something, see what comes
yeah.
out.
Richard Bertold.
Virtual?
My advice, I think, would be similar to Audrey's, is like, but I guess I feel like if somebody wants to write, then they must have something in mind that they do want to write. So I would just say, well, then write that. Now, the thing is, it will inevitably be bad, or almost inevitably. Maybe there are exceptions, but I know for me, like the first drafts of the stories I wanted to write were really bad. But you just sort of have to go through that and go through that process, and then you'll learn to revise it and get better. So there's no shortcut to instantly writing the thing you want perfectly. You just got to start trying something.
Well, to Audrey's point first, which is, if you haven't written much before, I have a huge list of things you can do, such as people post prompts. You could write a little, just as you said, write anything. Believe it or not, as much as we all hated school, but writing a critique or an essay on a book that you just read helps you deconstruct the book you just read and understand some of what the author is attempting to do there. I mean, again, I think they get to it. But
Some of us enjoy doing that.
right, yeah. You do that but I'm talking about like a full essay, like as if you do a composition, whatever. All those assignments from class that would have to do over a couple of days. But anyway, aside from, let's just say you have written a lot, like I did before I published anything. I wrote enough. Let's say you have. My suggestion there is, and I know I've mentioned this before, it's the trite one, and I have an anecdote about this, is start by writing what you want to read, right? If there is a genre that you love reading, then start there. And I want to emphasize the word start. Okay, start there, because at least you're comfortable in that space and you can focus more on what you're trying to get across in your voice. Now, the anecdote is this. I know someone that I met online, Holden Shepherd, who is an Australian author. And when he started out many, many years ago, I think it was just like in his late teens or early 20s, he was trying to write in the genre he loved, which was fantasy. So the whole world building and fantasy. He was writing and writing about it, but he got to a point where he was, I think, unsatisfied with it. And instead, he was taking some writing, that's another thing, writing workshops, great place to go, et cetera. Sign up. But he went to workshops and stuff, and he completely switched to going to a fiction based on a combination of his experiences, his thoughts, and and just going for a target topic, which was his experience of coming out as gay, etc. And so he wrote this book called The Invisible Boys, which is about a late teens who are dealing with their sexuality, four boys at that stage, and it did so well. It just went to the top. They even made a TV series of it in Australia, a streaming series. I mean, and he found his voice. So, that's why I say start. You start where you're comfortable so you could just at least get the practice. But then comes to what is it you want to say? All right, what is it you want to get out there? Once you've got a little bit of practice down, once you've got some experience in, again, workshops, et cetera, might help, but that's where you have to find your voice. That may be, that is, of course, trickier and harder because if you got something that's got to get out, that's where you focus. Okay.
Yeah, my advice generally is to just sit down and start writing, like you've said, because you don't know if you can do it until you start. And just, I just think about what I did. I went into the office and closed the door and started writing, and that's what started it all. My thing more is, I think, in line with what the next question is okay, you finish the story, what do you do next? And I think if you write a story and you think you did something decent with it and you want to keep doing this, then it's important to either find a person or a writing group who can give you good feedback, who you can trust to give you good feedback. And it's important to limit how many voices you listen to in terms of improving your writing. Don't go on social media, don't go on Twitter, don't read absolutely nothing online you should pay attention to, because it's just a I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but it's just ridiculous. And so many of the people who are on social media, you simply can't trust. They're going to try to sell you something. So don't do it online. Try to find those people in person in your community who will help you see where you can improve and get better. So, can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Hooray!
Something somewhere had got disconnected, but I knew it wasn't just tonight because I had an online interview to do last week, and they couldn't hear me again. So I don't know. I must have pressed a button sometimes, and what happened, I don't know. Probably one of those nice upgrades we get,
Yeah.
All your settings back to zero. Okay.
So what's your advice to someone who says they want to write for the first time?
3 words, basically, just do it. Because once you've got the whole thing down, then you can start fiddling with it or getting advice on it. But the number of people that have said, oh, yes, I'm going to write a book, or I have, I've started a book. It's a long, hard process. So really, to be quite honest, just do it. When you've got down what you want, whether it's a memoir or a story from beginning to end, then start thinking, there are 2 things, obviously, to think about. Firstly, do I just want to have a book to show my family and friends and leave when I, go up there? Or do I want to get it on and sell it to lots of people or promote it? The 2 quite different approaches. So a lot would depend on what the answer to that is too.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would warn people about writing something and then just shoving it up on Amazon without having it edited or a book cover that looks presentable in the right sort of genre, because that way everybody gets a very bad name for writing appalling books.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's probably what I would say overall.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. So there was a list of things. Some of these I think we've touched on briefly or more than briefly before, but the list included prologues, tense, point of view, show versus tell, trigger warnings. Any one of those jump out at you as something you want to say anything about?
I'm gonna start my next book. If I do ever manage to write a book again, it's gonna have a preface, and then it's gonna have a prologue, and then it's gonna have chapter 0, not chapter 1, but chapter 0.
Don't forget the foreword.
Then the foreword, yes.
The editor's note.
Acknowledgements.
Yes.
When I saw prologues, I know there was a lot of people online at that time who were, bashing prologues, and I don't understand. I've read great books with prologues or whatever. And I
There's
think
this one. This is the thing like Lord of the Rings, something. I think it was.
yeah, whatever. There's a number of them, but I think what the issue is, and people see this is what happens. There is an issue, and then somebody generalizes it, and then everybody jumps on that bandwagon. Because my attitude is, well, if they say like, oh, new stylists don't use prologues, all right, I'll just call it chapter one.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I did a little bit of digging, and what it seems like is that some authors, and this is to do with writing and your ability to write, not prologues. Some authors were creating and writing prologues, especially it seemed like in the fantasy area, but they were writing prologues that ended up having nothing to do with the book or the characters and no connection. I'm like, well, yeah, I get it. Why are you wasting my time with that? Especially if you're trying to hook a reader in. You don't want to do that. But that is the craft of writing. You can call that first chapter, whatever. I think prologues can be useful when they do tie in, obviously. And in fact, sometimes they tie in a very significant way, not at the very beginning of the story. It's like you hit that maybe midway or towards the I like better midway. And suddenly you realize now I get the connection. But so yeah, I think that whole prologue thing is all what's the word for that? There's an expression.
Social media hoax.
Well, yeah, but no, there's
Bad.
an old expression,
Yeah.
something that's an imagined thing. It'll hit me.
Yeah. I think I had the same reaction as you, Richard, because all of a sudden on social media, every other tweet or post related to writing was prologues are bad. Don't ever do a prologue. Oh, this book has a prologue. I hate prologues.
Yeah, people saying I will not. If I see a prologue, I won't buy the book.
But there was never ever anything that said what's wrong with them. It's just they're bad. So this goes back to the last topic we were talking about. This is why you ignore everything you see on the internet, on Twitter, on social media, is because it's nonsense. If you want to put a prologue in your book, put a prologue in your book.
I quite deliberately put a prologue in my first Amy series because it starts off with her, it's very linear, before she goes to Africa sort of thing. But I didn't want people to pick it up and think, oh, this is another soppy love story. So I started it by taking a bit from the middle where she's actually thrown into jail and she thinks she's about to be executed. And I thought that's going to be the hook. And hopefully, because I don't say whether she is or isn't, and we go back to the beginning when she leaves UK, that would be a hook and that people would read, well, how did she get into jail? How did she, was she killed? In other words, the idea was to bring a hook and hopefully and show that it wasn't just a soppy. Well, I say soppy, I shouldn't.
I'm actually sorry, Bertha, but
but it had a lot of grit in it.
You triggered something for me because you made me think of. I'm going to make a case for a prologue. Okay, simple. Imagine you're writing a story and the prologue is that would be there is in 1912. Somebody opens up a tomb of a mummy, and then they're cursed, whatever, and then it's generation later. Your story picks up with the family, a generation later, whatever. What is better, to have that prologue, which sets the stage, or as you're going through somewhere in the middle, you now have to do a flashback to why this is? That's very clunky and cumbersome. I'd rather give the setup and then maybe you don't realize the connection completely right away, but it's better than having a flashback. I don't like flashbacks that
Or
much.
you could have both. You have
both.
the setup, and then when you flash back, people will
At
remember.
least you have You have that
They'll
right.
say, oh, yeah, there's that.
You're not disrupting that flow. That's one of the problems with too many flashbacks. But although, depends how you
So I think that the prologue has to be short. I would think a short prologue is better than a long one. And it has to be kind of, like you say, a hook, and it has to be relevant to what follows.
Right.
And if you've got those things, then you're good to go.
Punch. I think that would work. So, I just made a case for, but
go ahead, Bertolt.
There's this one author I read, Jeff Cooper. He writes thrillers. And I think all of his thrillers, they kind of work the same way in that the prologue, the first murder happens in the prologue and we don't know who did it, but we see this happen. And then chapter 1 is the perspective of the main character who's going to be investigating it. So that hooks you with that. You're like, oh, well, I want to know who done it, as they say. But I think that's a good use of a prologue. Go ahead.
Actually, what I think of these prologues are like, when you go to, I don't know, I haven't been to a movie for eons, but it used to be you'd go to the movie and when the credits were rolling or right, the first credits, you'd see kind of something happening and it was something interesting. And it actually turns out to be happening near the end, right? So you see this stuff like somebody's funeral or something, and then
And the
the
story
real
gets,
thing starts and it's the person's earlier life and then by that time you're kind of putting it together, so that's how I see a prologue in a book.
They, I think the only time I've ever done something that would qualify as a prologue is with that first novel. And I did it because my initial first chapter, I just felt like it was boring. It started boring, and I wanted to write something that would catch the reader's attention. And
Mm-hmm.
so the first chapter in that novel is the woman waking up the next morning and seeing Jack McGee leaving after they had, had their romp the night before. And that doesn't happen until, a couple of chapters into the book, but I just felt like I had to do something to grab the attention rather than just, well, Jack McGee has to go to Bridgeport for work and blah 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 blah. So anyway, I think that's the only time I did it. My thing is how do people come up with these things that annoy them in books they read?
well,
Because if I read a novel, if the author wants a prologue, then I'm going to read the prologue and it's part of the story. I mean, it's like how does this become a pet peeve for people?
I think maybe it's in the fantasy genre, and I think maybe it's what's known as an info dump. So the
Okay,
prologue is kind of
yeah,
like ancient history of that
yeah,
world you've
yeah,
created, and you
yeah.
kind of start with that, and you kind of drone on and on and on without any
That
like of
would
real
be the
characters.
problem.
right. Which
Yeah,
which again is more like it's become hack. It's not the prologue per se. It's just that everyone seems to do that, and it gets a little tiresome. I get that. And that's the thing. I saw if it was authors giving the from on high telling you don't use prologues, I could easily tune that out. But these are readers, and then the people influencing readers, and I think that's a shame. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
I think some of these things are basically, I think, are grandstanding and fads that, as you say, Richard, people who've sort of made it, then they feel that they must share their wisdom with the world. And the one that drove me mad more so than prologues was, oh, you mustn't use an advert. Adverts are so out. They are last year's fashion. We don't use adverbs. I'm thinking, but I need to use them on
I love
occasion.
adverbs.
It's just
yeah,
annoying.
Stephen King
especially
is
especially
famous for
when
being
somebody says,
anti-adverb.
"Don't use words ending in ly."
Yeah,
You're supposed to do like a search for them because they're bad adverbs.
I can't tell you how much sometimes just the right adverb or adjective makes a sentence funnier. All right. Just that little extra in a punchline. And I know that because when people say, or things I've read, that have made me laugh, or people say, I love that sentence in your book. I'm like, yeah, because I tweaked it with a little more, a little bit of spice. Right? Hemingway didn't write comedy. Okay, and there's a reason why he would have sucked at it.
This is completely tangential, but I saw some clip of Orson Welles talking about how funny Hemingway was in person. He said you'd never guess it from his books.
Right. I bet you his stories had plenty of adverbs.
Depends how sober he was at the time.
Well, there's that.
Okay, what's next? What do we
next on
got?
the list is tense. I'll introduce this as uh, back when I was first getting into indie publishing and WordPress was way more active than it is now. There was a guy who wrote very Dungeons and Dragons based fantasy stories, and he had a really long series of books, and he wrote them all in present tense. and he would get bashed for having written them in present tense. And again, it's like the prologue thing. To this day, it's like, what's wrong with that? If he wants to write it in present tense, I mean, so I've written one thing in present tense. I didn't finish it. Bertold read it. Terror in a Small Town, if you remember that. But I wrote it in present tense because I wanted the immediacy of present tense. Present tense makes you feel like the story is happening right now.
Right now.
And that's the reason why I wrote that in present tense. Everything else that I've written has been in past tense, first person, past tense, third person, whatever. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it works for some things and it doesn't work for others. And see, this is the whole thing about what AI can't do. Everything we've talked about today, the prologue thing and the tense thing, it's all about sort of developing an instinct for what works. And that, like for thrillers, tense works quite well. In one of my books, I think I had parts of it in present tense, alternate chapters in present and past, that Winter Journeys book. And that worked. But you have to be consistent. I mean, the really bad thing is if somebody starts in present tense and then they shift into past and they don't realize it, or they're kind of random, that is irritating. And that's what you shouldn't do. But in terms of not using it ever, that doesn't make any sense. If it works for the story you're telling, then use present. If past works better, use that. And authors can try, changing. Like you get halfway through and you say, I think this will work better in past tense, and you rewrite it. So yeah, I don't think it's a rule thing at all.
I personally don't like reading a book in the present tense, especially when, Fred gets up in the morning and Fred is now going to work. And then it sort of jumps to Fred always wore his overcoat to work. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, present, now we're in the past.
Yeah.
And when he was little, Fred really wanted a big red overcoat. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, we've gone back to the future now. And I get very confused. So I'm very old-fashioned. I like basically stuff that's in the past, or at least stays in one tense. But you can't stay in the present if you're explaining what somebody has done or what their what their normal habits are. You've got to go into the past. And I find that very disruptive as a reader.
Off topic. Do you hear that? The bird?
No.
No.
I'm sorry. It's a cardinal blasting into my front door.
Yeah, sometimes I hear birds out here and perk up.
Regarding tense, one of the things that bothers me when I read manuscripts for other writers is what I've tried to, and I basically have given up on bringing this up, but everything is written in past tense, but there are present tense words that they slip into a past tense narrative. And I'm not going to do a very good job of describing this. I wish I had an example in front of me, but it's not in dialogue. It's not in the character's internal thought, in the story. It's in the narrative where suddenly, again, past tense, and the narrative says something about something that happened today. And it's like, it can't be today.
Oh,
This
so you're
is
not talking
all
about
past
just a mistaken grammar, which.
But I've had to argue about this with some of the writers whose manuscripts I've read, and they no, that's how. So I've just kind of given up on it. But you can't, in the narrative part of a story that's told in past tense, describe something as happening today, because it's not today. It was sometime back there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a pet peeve of mine when it comes to tense, and I feel like I see it more and more these days. Past tense stories that include present tense words or concepts where they shouldn't. So that's just my pickiness.
Mark, are you talking about somebody in the Victorian era saying, "Oh gosh, that's real cool"?
Yeah, no, well, that too. Yeah, that too.
Oh, yeah,
that too.
The anachronism.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you were talking about like grammatical errors, like which my Blue Sky post, I'm notorious for doing stupid things like that.
It's
because
blue
I'm
sky
thinking in
futures.
past and then I put a present. So
Yeah, but that's I'm talking about. Yeah,
it's about intentional.
yeah.
Right.
They want that, and it's like I don't get it. It didn't happen today. It couldn't happen today.
Mhm.
So anyway, um,
Point of view we have
point
here.
of view.
Point of view and tense are kind of tied together.
Yeah,
And yeah, point of view can be a tricky one as well. I mean, you hear about don't head hop, which is sort of kind of too general, really. But you have to, when you're writing something, you have to decide about point of view, and you have to stick to it. You can't if you have if you're telling it from one character's point of view, you really can't shift into another one, and it's who knows what. I mean, that's where it gets tricky. If you're in say past tense and first person, that first person is only going to know something unless someone tells them or they discover
yeah,
it somehow.
yeah.
You can't tell what someone else is thinking. So it really needs a lot of focus when you are using point of view. And of course, you can shift from chapter to chapter and then label it with which character
Yeah.
is going to be your point of view character for that, especially if it's first person. So yeah, that's a thing that I think a lot of people have problems with. And I think that's where reading a lot really helps before you start writing, because you can absorb that kind of thing almost unconsciously before you have to produce something yourself.
What about second person point of view?
I was gonna point that out.
No, that's one you don't see much, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I was gonna say, I was gonna make the comment when we talk about present tense as well. We grow up and we're used to telling stories, and stories are usually written the way I like to write them myself, but are more or less omniscient and past tense, like we're saying what happened. The challenge comes from shifting from that. First person is also the way we tell a lot of stories, but second person, that's really difficult. And I have seen authors try it and fail, and I've seen authors try it and succeed. And that's same thing with writing present tense. It's challenging. It's challenging for an author. I see why authors, in fact, just want to do that, pushing themselves. But I just want to put this caveat: know that it's challenging if you are an author and you want to attempt second person. Understand how it's going to maybe jar the reader if you're not really, really, really good at it. So I would say practice it, a lot of revisions, etc. Because I have seen these things fail. I've also seen where point of view is shifted, and this is even for famous works like Wuthering Heights, which is a story I've said I don't like. And it does shift from who's telling the story. And even sometimes I think it even shifts to a third person. It just keeps shifting point of view. Again, I think you have to be careful and make it very clear when that shift happens. So, yeah. So point of view is an interesting one. And second person, Berthold, yeah, it's rare. And there's a reason why it's rare. It's difficult. It's very difficult to hold the reader's attention and guide the reader properly through a story without it even getting gimmicky at some point.
Probably
That's
be
it.
best done as a short story and sort
Yeah,
of an
yeah,
experiment.
right.
You
I
write a
think
short
short stories give
experimental
you
piece.
so much. Yeah, short stories. I used to love to write in short story form, and they give you so much more freedom to do whatever you want to do because you don't have to carry that weight the whole way.
Well, I was thinking of an example where there's a book where kind of what the author does is jump to different people's points of view in an elegant sort of way. And he does it with second person. He says, "You are so and so, and this is what you, as so and so, are feeling right now." It was interesting.
Yeah, it is like I said, it's a challenge. It's that's true crafting if you do it. Kudos to you. That's Roku pottery.
Well, now I have a challenge.
There you go.
But one thing, Mark, is that, whichever point of view you're coming from, and I come across this so often that you have 6 characters in a book and everybody's name begins with a B
Yeah,
or a C or a D.
Yeah.
and you get so confused.
Confused, right? That
Right.
actually,
Ridiculous. And people keep doing it, and I don't know why, because you don't know who's talking to whom, at what time, and what position they're in, what relationship they've got.
Yeah. I think for the most part, for me, it comes down to I write first person if I want to focus on that character's perspective and that character's experience.
right.
And I'm sure that there is a way to inject other people's perspectives and experiences into a first person story told from that one person's perspective, but I'm not talented enough to figure that out. So when I have a story where I want to have different characters, perspectives, and whatever, then I write in third person. And it helps me be able to inject what other characters are experiencing into the story.
I definitely wanted to do a first person book at some point. They can be, especially in comedy, they could be really, really funny. Because you aren't omniscient, and you sometimes, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it could really, yeah, and you've seen that there's both books and movies where, comedies where they're first person. So
In a few of my books, well, one series of my book, it takes the situation from A's your point of view, and then B's point of view, and then C's point of view, but they are clearly labeled at the beginning of each chapter that we jump from one character to another to another. So we do get an all-round situation, or all-round reactions to a particular situation that's happened.
I did that with one of my novels too.
Yeah, you have to be very clear that, it's changed point of view.
Well, one last thing, it's not on writing and has to do actually with TV and movies. And this is just a pet peeve about point of view. I have a pet peeve, which I hate, and I always see, is when people in movies and TV shows either have dreams or flashbacks, they're in third person. It's their flashback, but you're watching it in third person. You're seeing them walk into a room, whatever. And I'm like, that's not the way memory
That's not how
works.
you dream.
And
Yeah.
that's not how you dream. Your memory is not from a third person point of view.
Are you talking about who was it waking up in the shower and realizing JR wasn't dead or whatever it was?
Bobby.
Any of them.
It was all a dream.
Dallas.
You
Yeah.
never see a flashback on TV that is from that person's point of view.
Yeah.
It's always just using a clip from before.
Yeah. Okay. I unfortunately have to go mow the lawn, so
Okay.
we're moving on to our last topic, which Richard has been waiting over an hour to talk about.
Oh.
Would you care to introduce this topic?
Okay, the question that came up was, is it octopuses or octopi? The short answer is both are accepted. Okay, both forms are accepted. You can use either. The slightly longer answer is that it's more accurate to say octopuses. And again, I didn't have my notes with me. I should have, but I think because octopus originally is from a Greek root, not a Latin root. And in Latin, the plural of US is an I, so octopi. But it was originally termed from octopuses more because octo is in both languages, so it makes it a little confusing. And that's why there was enough confusion for 100 years or so, easily more, as to which one, but it became accepted to use both. So feel free to say octopuses or octopi. But if you want to seem to be a little bit of a snob, you will be like me and say octopuses.
This is so interesting because H.P. Lovecraft, who was possibly the most snobbish elitist man to ever live, used octopi in one of his stories. So he got it wrong. Well, wrong from the snob point of view.
Right.
Which I find interesting.
So the perfectionist, but definitely both are more than adequately acceptable.
I suspect that somebody called Webster, Merriam-Webster, was it, had something to do with this, because I review, and I have to run my review through a special American spelling thing so that I know it's going to be correct for Americans. I've got red lines under everything on my British keyboard, if you like. So I suspect that octopi was the original,
It's octopus.
taken from the Latin, and it was possibly changed a bit.
The
No?
word started from Greek, so that's why, and it's transferred over to Latin. So that's
Okay.
why octopuses was, and then it became, and then the Latin, it was used in Latin, and then the assumption was they thought it was Latin. So, but again, it has been dually used for so long and that's what we do for accepted use. If it constantly you can actually use ain't if you want. It gets used for so much and it shows up in print and so much that it becomes an accepted form. So, but it has been for a long time. But the original octopus was Greek,
Okay.
and then transferred to Latin because those Romans, they took everything Greek. They loved it. They tried to wipe them out, but they took their culture.
Thank you for joining us in this month's episode of Awkward Words and How You Pluralize Them. Tune in next time for moose.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody.
Little strawberry.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Take care, everyone. Good to see you all.
Bye-bye.